Rick Barnes at the Big Orange Caravan made some very revealing comments about Tennessee on the NIL front and why they have missed on a couple of guys. Most notably, he didn't say specifically, but for those who don't know, they missed on 2 shooting guards before they landed Amar Abram on Tuesday. And Rodney Rice was all but a favorite. Tennessee was all but a favorite to land him. It was almost a done deal since his teammate Jacoby Gillespie at Maryland had gone to Tennessee, but he went elsewhere. But Rick Barnes made some very revealing comments about why Tennessee didn't land some of the guys they were trying to land. And we're going to play what he said right now because it's kind of interesting. So here's a quick quote from Rick Barnes right now.
We have a limit we're going to. And if somebody else wants, and it's happened. I mean, it's happened this year. You know, we've been involved with guys that truly wanted to come to the University of Tennessee, but they were looking for more money than we were able to provide, and because of us having to build our roster the best way that we could. So yeah, that happens. I mean, oftentimes you hear prospects say it's not going to be about the money, but more times than not, when there's a big discrepancy there, I mean, I get it. I mean, I totally get it. I mean. But we have to believe in our program, what we have in place, and we know how far we're willing to go with each prospect, and that's the cutoff. And if someone else offers them more, we would say, hey, good luck. You know,
that last quote, good luck. We just can't get there. Guys, this is kind of revealing. Rick Barnes is almost admitting they don't necessarily have the NIL funds to rebuild their roster through the transfer portal. Now, there's a multitude of reasons this could be possible. Maybe Tennessee overstretched its NIL budget to try to land Nate Ament, the 5-star forward, the greatest recruit in Tennessee basketball history, the highest rated recruit in Tennessee basketball history. Maybe Tennessee, because there was so much roster rebuilding this year that Rick Barnes had to do with 4 starters left, maybe he was stretched thin in NIL money to lure players in. Maybe more of the money than even most schools is being directed towards football. Or maybe Tennessee's overstretched on NIL funds. So today's tough question is this. Is Tennessee struggling more on the NIL front than the Vols are letting on? More news coming out of this, and the reason this is relevant is that Texas's college football NIL budget is reportedly going to be between 35 and 40 million next year. Now, we know from the inside that the NIL budgets for most schools are mostly, let's say, 20 million, something like that, 22 million. And we also know there's a gap between the big SEC schools and the major Big Ten schools. Well, Wes and I have talked about that. That's partly to do with some of the boosters and the age and the amount of money the boosters of certain ages are willing to give up, but it's also partly to do with the TV revenue. And there's more flex money for the boosters at the Big Ten schools because the SEC bungled its TV negotiations, and the Big Ten hit a home run with it. So with that in mind, you really have to wonder, is Tennessee struggling? I'm going to say yes. Guys, I think Tennessee's struggling on the NIL front. I think they're overstretched. Now, this is not with paying Nico. I don't know if it has much to do with paying Nico. I think that they were in negotiations. I don't think anybody blames them for not being willing to pay $4 million. I know Nico says it was about the money. If it was $4 million, Jimmy Hyams is right. He would have been back at Tennessee. But I do think there is a legitimate argument that Tennessee is stretched thin with NIL. It's not what we thought it would be. When this all launched about 3 years ago, we thought Tennessee would have a big NIL advantage. But a couple of things have happened since then. One, some of the top boosters have sold their stake in certain companies. Pilot, for instance, while there is a partnership with Tennessee for Neyland Stadium, Pilot is no longer owned by the Haslams. It's owned by Warren Buffett. Now, that's probably a good thing for Tennessee, given how much Jimmy Haslam screwed up the program when he was giving money. But at the same time, that's a giant company that no longer can just write checks for Tennessee the way they used to. They're going to think about money more than anything else. And as I've said for a while, billionaires put their money above everything. So selling their money, many of the top boosters who graduated from Tennessee, the top Tennessee fans selling their businesses counts for one thing. That's happening with a lot of older businesses now, a lot of older guys who run businesses. It's happening at Auburn. Also, some top SEC billionaire boosters are just older. And they don't want to pay players like this. They're still already opposed to NIL in general. They may pay for the box and the suite. They may begrudgingly accept the talent fee that Danny White has put in. But just directly paying players, they're not really fans of that. So with that in mind, it's kind of making you think, how thin is Tennessee stretched? Because 3 years ago when this launched, we thought this was going to give Tennessee a giant advantage. They had such an endorsement of money flowing in, but it's looking like they don't have the same NIL cash that many of these other schools do. Maybe they do in the SEC, but look, guys, there's a reason the Big Ten has won the last 2 national titles, and it could be due to NIL money. And this may get even crazier going forward. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, Play to Win, Why Settle, Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. They bring us today's tough question.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones.
All right, the recent poll question, is Tennessee struggling more on the NIL front than the Vols are letting on? 59% of you say yes, 40% say no. I'm gonna put a new question up, which is why is Rick Barnes unable to lure top talent with enough NIL cash? Or how about this? Why is NIL cash holding Tennessee basketball back with some players? We'll say the Vols are too many roster spots to fill. We could say Vols spent too much on Nate Ament. We'll say Vols spending more on Vols spending too much on football. Vols way more focused on football spending. Or, and the last option, Vols are overstretched. So that's how we're going to do this. Okay, so why is NIL cash holding Tennessee basketball back with some players? Too many roster spots to fill. Vols spent too much on Nate Ament. Vols more focused on football spending, or Vols are overstretched in NIL funds. You guys let me know. I think it's the overstretched on NIL funds. I do. I do think that with their overstretching, they're going to devote. I mean, it could be a combination of that and football spending. Because they're overstretched, they're going to spend. They're going to focus even more on football disproportionately because they just can't afford to. It's more important to make sure the football program's afloat than anything else. But I think in general, guys, this is a big problem. Okay, you have to wonder how much Tennessee can afford to pay players going forward, and how much trouble is the athletic program in. I mean, is an athletic program going to have to take a hit? Will it be basketball? Will they have to devote all their resources to football to be good there, and then let basketball take a hit because they don't have to worry about too much money on the NIL front for women's basketball, baseball, softball, those non-revenue sports? Okay, so I think in general there's a real legitimate question, guys, about whether or not Tennessee is going to be able to spend on the NIL front going forward, because there are just a lot of issues. There are so many questions about how this is going to work out long term. And it's not just schools paying players. That's not the relevant part. The relevant part is what boosters can give in endorsements, because technically endorsements can't be regulated by Congress. They can't be regulated by the NCAA. They can't be regulated by anything. NFL players, they got a salary cap. They got a union. But you can't limit how much they make on endorsement money. They can get endorsements from whatever the heck they want to get, okay? So with that in mind, how much money are boosters willing to lose on players just to see their teams win on Saturday? And what schools have the boosters willing to lose the most money to do that? That is the question. And that is something we don't know yet. And it's something that's going to have to be figured out, because we definitely don't know if there is enough NIL revenue in the tank to handle this. So again, vote on the poll question. Why is NIL cash holding Tennessee basketball back with some players? Too many roster spots to fill. Vols spent too much on Nate Ament. Vols more focused on football spending. Vols are overstretched in funds. This is starting to be revealing, okay? And I'm going to give you the poll question soon, but look, Danny White might have some explaining to do soon enough because they made us believe that they are ahead of the NIL curve in every single way, and we thought that just last year. It doesn't seem like that right now, though, does it? It seems like there's a much bigger issue at play, and we're going to have to figure out how that's going to be playing out because, honestly, I have a feeling that Tennessee could fall even worse than not to a decade of dysfunction because Josh Heupel's done a much better job just as a competent coach than previous schools, but that they could be falling into a mid-program, and it might be hard to punch that top ladder, particularly versus the Big Ten schools, given these NIL funds.